do we need to make some agreement? Because we are almost 30 minutes late. What time should we finish this panel? I think we should add some more minutes because we are going to have 4 presenters. Is that okay? So we will join the next panel a bit late too. So thank you very much for attending this panel. So this panel has 4 presenters. The first presenter is Scott Hearnden. So he will be presenting on peace and human rights in Sri Lanka. If Scott is here, please come forward. Thank you very much. And the second presenter is Aris Munandar. So he will be presenting on the development of a service model of mental health on social rehabilitation of people with psycho. Okay. Thank you very much. Please come forward. And the third presenter is Suheri. So he will be presenting on the dynamic fragility of human rights concepts, a case study of Shia in Indonesia. Welcome aboard. And the last presenter is Joan Paula Deveraturda. Please come forward, please. Okay, welcome aboard. So she will be presenting on violence against children through online sexual abuse and exploitation, the case of Philippine. So we already have 4 presenters. So if now we start this panel 30 minutes late, so we are going to finish our panel perhaps. Is that okay if we finish at 11? Should be okay, right? Yeah, thank you very much, because we are 30 minutes late, yeah? So for each presenter, I will give you a maximum is maybe 10 to 15 minutes. So the first presenter will be given by Scott Hearnden. I will read his bio. There is no bio. Oh my goodness. I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry. But we talk each other. So Scott is based in New Delhi, but he is associated with Sydney University. Thank you very much for having us a very short conversation. I know you a little bit, yeah. Okay, I give time for you, 10 to 15 minutes.
Hello, everyone. But everybody can hear me. Thank you. This is a 2-part presentation, really. It looks at some principal research which I completed some years back on Sri Lanka, and it also, and the further research, which I'll refer to that as the principal research, and then the further research extends the first research into the questions of indigeneity. But before I start, I just also wanted to thank the organisers of this conference, because it has been a marvellous conference, and thank yous to Professor Karim and also Dr. Khanif and to Michelle Ford from Sydney University. Can we go to the next slide, please? I have quite a lot of slides, but given we only have 15 minutes and we're running late, I'm going to cut things back a little bit, and I'll abbreviate what I'm going to say. So in this presentation, I will be looking at these 10 items. But in a summary form, peace and conflict and the meanings around peace and conflict in Sri Lanka, the theoretical basis for the research, and in particular how human rights is part of that research, the findings of the research, and then the questions around the next research that I've started on Indigenous persons. Next slide, please. Just so that everybody knows where Sri Lanka is, in case our geography is a little off. Here is India. Sri Lanka is here at the bottom southeast corner of the continent, you can see that it is in a very interesting position in terms of immigration. It's very close to the continental the subcontinent, and also it has been on major trading sea routes from the Middle East over the centuries. Next slide, please. So what this means is that I think we can think of the occupation of the island in 4 distinct groups. First of all, there is the indigenous people who were there originally, but then there have been waves of immigrants. So for the last 1,500 years, there have been Sinhala, Tamil people have arrived on the island, and from the Arab traders, there is a small Muslim community as well that is in Sri Lanka. Then in the last 500 years, it's been a colonial, European maritime colonial island, in which first the Portuguese, then the Dutch, and then the British were in Sri Lanka. And then in 1948, the island became independent, and it's the period of after independence that I've been researching. Next slide. So there have been many conflicts on the island, some public, some not public. On the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see that I have noted some of the key public conflicts that have occurred that forms part of the public narrative in Sri Lanka since independence. There was a southern uprising called the Janata Vimukti Peramuna peoples. They were youth, students, farmers who rose against the government in the south. They were disaffected. Then there was the 30-year war with the Tamil Tigers, which I'm sure many people have heard about. But there's also a lot of latent conflicts with absent or silenced narratives, and this is where my research has been focused. And it is a cause for structural violence and direct violence towards other marginalised communities. So when I undertook my research, I looked for those other communities, and so what I discovered was that hidden conflicts exist within the country relating to people who have diverse sexuality and non-diverse sexuality, people who have diverse and non-diverse genders, people with disabilities and age. So those 4 categories formed the basis of my research. I'm now looking at the new categories below of Indigenous and First Nations people, and possibly religious discrimination as well. And in fact, the Muslim community in Sri Lanka has been the subject of violence over the past several years. Next slide, please. Very briefly, there have been some peace initiatives since 1948. The top 2 I won't go into, but they effectively had political interference and went no further after they were completed. Paperwork went in, but nothing happened. The most interesting, perhaps, is that uprising which occurred last year, the Aragalaya movement of 2022. It was a spontaneous uprising of civil society that quickly but loosely organised into a movement. Student organisations, faith-based organisations, professional societies, and more broadly other marginalised people in Sri Lanka joined the movement. Next slide, please. And here are some photographs of the uprising, and you can see in the top two photographs, the people have gone into the presidential palace, in the swimming pool, the president's swimming pool, taken over and formed large demonstrations outside the front of the government offices. So this was democracy in action, civil society in action, and it was a very interesting phenomenon. Of course, it led to the ousting of the president who flew to Singapore. He has returned to the country, of course, and there's a bit of a caretaker government in at the moment. But it was a very interesting exercise in people power. Next slide, please. So just a little bit about the theory of this research. I am from the peace and conflict studies theoretical background. So I largely drew upon Johan Galtung and Paul D. Scott, who are peace scholars. You may have heard of them. Now, they hypothesize that if you triangulate democracy, human right, and development, then you should be able to successfully move towards a peaceful society. And so I used those as a basis for my arguments and for my research. Civil society, of course, and people's participation in society through a legalistic point of view can be considered, through, for example, Article 19 of the UN Declaration of Human Rights, peaceful meetings, Article 20, and then the International Labour Organization also has some conventions which relate to this. Next slide, please. In terms of my methodologies, this is the list. I'm not sure if you can see it very well there, but I'll go to two that I think is interesting. The second point is intersectionality. I used intersectionality in order to look at the varying marginalities between the different groups that I referred to earlier. I was interested to know what were the differences in marginalities, but also what were the common marginalizations that people experienced. And so I interviewed 22 people. And once I had my, I had all the interviewees, and I could understand all their identities that they presented to the world, so that people knew who they were. I categorized them into 9 LGBTIQ people and 13 non-LGBTIQ people. Now, this doesn't mean that that's all they are, because all the people I interviewed presented with multiple identities. And so it's important to remember that all these people are, that division has just been made for the convenience of the research, but in fact all these people had similar and distinguishable experiences based on their varying identities. Next slide, please. So some of the first findings that the interviewees presented to me. In terms of democracy, peace, democracy, human rights and civil society, they said to me that they anticipated a democratic entitlement in the form of participatory democracy. Most of the people were involved in civil society, NGOs, faith-based organizations, grassroots organizations, and they wanted to have a voice in their community. But at the moment, the structures within the community stopped them from doing that, and that marginalized them. So, for example, on the right-hand side is a diagram of what Galtung and Scott refer to as a feedback loop in democracy. And so what you have is the civil society speaking up to power in government and the political elite, and then you have the political elite speaking down as well to civil society. And so there's a constant dialogue of participation happening between the political sphere in government areas and the political sphere in civil society. And so I'll come back to that point. The second thing they said was that they felt that horizontal and divisible power structures were important. So democratizing a society breaks down vertical hierarchical power structures and creates horizontal power structures. And if you have liberal democracy, of course, you break that horizontal structure down into various points of power where you have civil society, government, judiciary, media, academia, and so forth. They said that they wanted civil society to inject checks and balances on authority, and hence the feedback loop again allows for those checks and balances to occur. They said that civil society should be understood as a political entity, not just a charity. Because what is politics? Well, it's about having a point of view and expressing that point of view. So civil society plays a very important role, political role, in feeding up into policy making and government, and academia, I think, is part of that as well. They said they wanted a rights-based society with equity. Next slide, please. Now, the key human rights area that I examined in the study looked at access to justice, the presence of structural barriers, and I was interested to also understand how people from marginalised communities understood human rights and how they thought human rights would help them. Next slide, please. I think the important thing here also is that when people spoke about their participation, they started to introduce the idea that is often not referred to of the third generational human right, that self-determinative quality or aspect of human rights, which creates our purposive selves and that leads to self-determination. Next slide. The participants told me that they were concerned about the politicisation of justice. They said that peace, justice and human rights were fundamentals through which participants' self-purposive and self-determinative selves could be realised. So that was about themselves becoming important advocates as individuals within community. They were frustrated with majoritarianism. And I think we heard this morning in the plenary session about some of the difficulties in potentially getting elites in political spheres to motivated to do things. Two more slides forward, please. Thank you. Now, the further research that I'm doing is with Indigenous peoples. It's a little bit difficult because to access the country unless the Sri Lankan government gives me authority, and at this stage they have not. Indeed, when I did the initial research, I couldn't get access to the country. So I had to wait for my interviewees to leave the country for their own safety in order to be interviewed. This, of course, won't be possible in this part of the research because the Veda people are not people who will be mobile globally. So in my research so far, and largely it's been literature reviewing, I've found that the Veda peoples continued their cultural practices until independence. So in 1940, up till 1948, they were people whose traditional culture was in the forests. They were gatherers, people who hunted, and that was only disturbed in this last period of that I referred to in the earlier slides. The demographic data is extremely thin, and it varies subject to topic and source. In much of Sri Lanka's data, then the Veda people are not mentioned at all. And so they're a very small and very marginalised group of people. Structural barriers constrain their identities. Integrationist policies have been imposed upon them, and they have been forced into relocations off their traditional lands into newly constructed villages. It means that when they do go back into the forests, which have become national parks, they are usually harassed and fined and punished as a result of that. There's no Veda participation or visibility in the political sphere. The result of this marginalisation appears to be alcoholism and in declining mental health and declining populations. Next slide, please. And the next slide as well. This slide is a subset of the former slide, but because we're time constrained, I'll just move straight to this. And what I've done is I've selected some emergent and what I call level 2 cross-cutting themes which the participants raised and pointed towards as being problematic for them and their marginality. So leadership was one issue, one big issue, that the same leaders in the political sphere are always there, or they rotate around. And so it's very difficult to get new, creative, interested people who are prepared to move the country in a more, perhaps, enlightened direction. So leadership for people was a big problem. Patriarchy, heteronormativity they said, caused them to be vulnerable communities. Culture, caste and human rights was discussed. People said that they felt their traditional Sri Lankan culture, and of course each person had different identities, so although one can consider one large Sri Lankan culture, Sinhala culture is different to Hindu culture, etc. And so each person spoke for themselves and not necessarily for the whole of Sri Lanka sometimes. But most people said that culture and human rights, traditional culture, was not in conflict with human rights. But some people said to me, where human rights is in conflict with culture, human rights they would prefer to take precedence. So, and of course we must remember culture changes. Culture is dynamic, culture is not static. And so there may be a merger also between current culture and human rights. So they said they thought a transitional justice mechanism is necessary to bring peace to the country, that a constitutional review was certainly important and should be publishable, and they wanted the re-emergence of civil society, which of course has been lost for many years. Next slide, please. So just to conclude and summarise, there have been waves of immigration and peoples and colonisation in the country. The methods I selected enabled participants to demonstrate through their experiences and common marginalisations. And I think that's an important point because the research I undertook specifically was designed to inject a democratising impact upon the participants. Just like this conference, I think, the way the conference is being run has a great democratising impact. It allows us to all come together, it allows us to make our own choices as to which venues we wish to go to, and it allows us to open to questions and discuss issues. Multiple conflicts have ensued through weak democracy and inattention to human rights and a lack of space for civil society to function, resulting in structural barriers. And these weaknesses have maintained the marginalisation of communities and frustrated the advent of positive peace. Next slide, please. Just for interest, these are the theoretical background to the substantive part of the research, and I can share these with anybody if they would like at a later stage. Next slide, please. And this is the theoretical background to the methodology. Next slide, please. And just to thank the people who supported me in bringing this presentation together. And my researchers, my supervisors that assisted me at the beginning of the research are on the right-hand side. So thanks to everybody for that and for coming to this session.
Thank you very much, Dr. Scott. I forgot to mention that his paper is selected one as one of best papers out of 15 best paper by the Ministry of Law and Human Rights. So I already read through your article. Thank you very much, very interesting. The next speaker will be co-chair of Dr. Aris Munandar. So please, you can explain who you are. And then she will be discussing on the development of a service model of mental health. Please go ahead, 15 minutes.
Yeah. Check. Thank you very much everyone for this opportunity. Actually, for this paper is developed and written by Mr. Aris Munandar and Mrs. Siswaning Tiastri Nugraheni. But since due to some of personal matter, Mr. Aris Munandar cannot be participate here with us. And my name is Angga Angelika Praptantia, and I'm one of the team member so that this paper could written and presenting to you all. Okay, here there is Mbak Tias, my co-presenting for this paper. And our paper title is Development of a Model of Mental Health Services and Social Rehabilitation for Psychosocial Disability. Next slide, please. Okay. First, for the background, WHO noted that 2012, people with mental disorders in the world reached 450 million people. And from basic health research shows that now in special district of Yogyakarta province is the highest, the second highest number with the people with mental health disorder. Next. Mental health problems usually from these three reasons. The first one is the lack of public understanding regarding mental health, and also the stigma around mental health issue and unequal distribution of mental health services. And in Yogyakarta itself, the higher rates, with the second number higher rates, there are three reasons why it is becoming highest. The first one is the high rate of the poverty, and then there is no psychosocial rehabilitation in the community, and the last is the higher case of possibility, the migration of person with psychosocial disability from border areas. Next slide. Okay, since 2017, Yakum Rehabilitation Center has implemented the program, and we call it community-based mental health rehabilitation program that aim for people with psychosocial disability and their family. And this been implemented in 3 districts in Yogyakarta. It's in Sleman, Kulon Progo, and also Gunung Kidul. This program approach by providing assistance to person with psychosocial disability and their family, increasing community capacity, and encouraging improvement in government at the village level, district levels, and also the provincial levels. Next slide, please. And for the research purposes, the first one, we want to describe the strategic approach in handling mental health problems using community resources. And the second is to find out to what extent policy relate to person with psychosocial disability can accommodate their rights. And the last is to see to what extent the impact of the implementation and development of mental health social rehabilitation model developed by Yakum Rehabilitation Center contribute to mental health management in special district of Yogyakarta. And for the research methodology that we're using is mixed method and designed cross-sectionally. And the data collection consists of surveys, in-depth interview, and then literature review, and also case studies. Next. Here, the challenge in dealing with mental health issue in the community. The first one is not all of the person with psychosocial disability receive routine medication, and also psychosocial therapy and productivity therapy in the community. And also, the family with the person with psychosocial disability do not have or still lack of understanding on how to assist person with psychosocial disability needs. And there is lack of raising awareness also in the community, and especially about the community mental health itself. And there is no specific budgeting from government. Even if village government does have fund available, it is still not utilized it for the addressing the mental health issue in their village. And the last is mental health handling. It's only on the curative aspect, not not optimizing from the promotive, prevention, or rehabilitative aspects. Next slide. Here, this data shows number of the poor people in special district of Yogyakarta and in 5 districts. As we can see that there is, it shows that there has been an increase from 2019 to 2020, and it is in line with the number of people or person with psychosocial disability in all of the Yogyakarta districts. Next. Okay, so now point of view on mental health. Before, we know that the medical model perspective on mental health is seen. So the person with psychosocial disability, we can see them as a disease, or it's like we treated them and it must be cured. But right now, the perspective has shifted. We shifted it, it's not only as a disease, but also we're trying to do the approach by the right-based approach, not only the person-centered approach. Next. The following is a comprehensive mental health service model. Okay, I think, yeah, it's not quite clear, yeah, the presentation. Okay, I would like to make the next explanation. So, the comprehensive mental health service model, the barriers and the needs of the person with psychosocial disability and their family are the center of this attention. Our institution, Yakum Rehabilitation Center, has been developing this model since 2016, and this model shows a vertical and horizontal relationship between institutional base and also community base. For the institution base, generally based on like referral, specialists, and included in National Health Insurance or BPJS coverage, and it's short term, only 2 weeks if we use the BPJS in Indonesia. And for the community-based services are generally emphasizing on early detection and treatment, and then social support, and also self-help, and then it is becoming long-term because it's in the community. These two complement each other, and initiative can be started from top or from the bottom. Next. Here, what is the principle of the model, basic concept of post-recovery? The first one, the principal models are right-based, and it is affordable and accessible. And also it can be strengthening the existing mental health service system that already in the community, and also involving the collaboration of health sector and non-health sector in the community. Next. Community-based rehabilitation, or CBR, is implemented as a strategy as well as handling services, empowerment, program for person with psychosocial disability by involving the existing resources in the community for the initial stage. Next. And here, the aspect that CBR needs for person with psychosocial disability treatment, it's like including the proper service for person with psychosocial disability on their rehabilitation. And the second is equal rights on health, education, and social security aspects for them, and also social support from the family and the community. And the last is the actualization of an inclusive society and reduction of negative stigma. Next. The fulfillment of the rights of psychosocial disability encourages policymakers from various levels, or we can say multi-sectoral level are participated in the policymaker, as say like government, non-government, and then educational institutions, religious institutions, private sectors, and it is included in terms of access, participation, and opportunity for person with psychosocial disability to be able to recover and being independent for themselves. Next. And here, in the context of mental health advocacy of psychosocial disability, we have been providing assistance for medical, social, and productive health aspect for the person with psychosocial disability. And at the level of policymaker, we collaborated to develop policies that could accommodate the needs of person with psychosocial disability, including the anti-stigma campaign also. And our intervention toward person with psychosocial disability and family through increasing the capacity of self-help group and then the disabled people organization member to be able to promote and also educate in the community and advocate policy about mental health. Next. And here the result are the best practice that we've been doing by the Yakum Rehabilitation Center. The first one, we're doing the home visit for the person with psychosocial disability. In the home visit, we're doing the medication monitoring to maintaining the stability from the person with psychosocial disability and also engaging in communication with their caregiver to understand what they're been through all this year as caregivers for this person with psychosocial disability. And also we're doing the motivation and also monitoring on their productivity. Next. And here for the individual support, or we can say it's social support, is by involving the person with psychosocial disability in the community activity, such as like kerja bakti, or maybe night watch, or Quran recitation, etc. By involving them into this activity in the society, it can make them to know that they are being accepted by the community, and also it will help them to becoming more confident about themselves, and it will be a factor for them to be accept their self about their disability. Next. And organizing self-help group. Self-help group is consists of person with psychosocial disability, and then their caregiver, the community mental health volunteer, and also there is a village government, and also a disabled people organization also included in this self-help group. It's kind of like a peer support or like group therapy, some kinds like that. And the purpose we're doing this self-help group is to provide mutual support for the person with psychosocial disability and as a space for them to share their experience. So the family also feels like, oh, I'm not the only one with the family who has psychosocial disability. Next. And facilitating psychosocial therapy and social rehabilitation, by doing this, we are actually collaborating with primary healthcare in each district, and we're doing like the capacity building and strengthening their skills to assist person with psychosocial disability. The topics are such as like the symptom management recognized, and then verbal, non-verbal communication skills, and then there is group activity therapy for family and also the person with psychosocial disability, and then there is occupational and vocational support for them, and also we're trying to do the reintegration into society, so they will connect it into the society more. And also the last one is the social advocacy. Next. And to reinforce the mental health CBR or community-based rehabilitation efforts and practices, it is necessary to conduct community-based mental health advocacy. And the advocacy strategy for fulfilling the rights of person with psychosocial disability are The first one, we're trying to encourage the making policy of regional regulation for handling mental health. And then we encourage the making of mental health policy that are inclusive and gender responsive. And also, we encourage the making of budgetary policy to accelerate of handling of mental health issue in Yogyakarta, and also ensure that mental health treatment services are inclusive and accessible based on human rights. Next. And one of the key to conduct successful mental health advocacy is to encourage and make person with psychosocial disability is actively participate in the advocacy process. This is one of one most successful that we're ever trying to do for the person with psychosocial disability, because they the one who understand what they need, so they can speak directly to the policymakers. Next. We are now at the recommendation and conclusion. So, as the CBR mental health is regarded as a strategy and also of approach to treating mental health and community-based psychosocial rehabilitation, it is important to highlight that assistance and empowerment for person with psychosocial disability in recovery-oriented and also right-based, and provide guidance for government in every level related to division of authority, which will be close related to budget allocation. Next. Oh, back, sorry. Yeah, thank you. And then the most important that we cannot forget is how to conduct mental health campaign for raising awareness on mental health. And also the implementation of mental health treatment policy must be outlined through regional head decree. And the last is to ensure the actualization of proper accommodation through affirmative action for person with psychosocial disability. Next. Okay, I think that's the last slide. Thank you very much for your attention. Good morning.
Thank you very much, Mbak. I don't want to summarize, yeah. So we go to the next speaker, Mas Suheri. So he will be presenting on the dynamics of fragility of human rights concept, a case study of Shia in Indonesia. So I will briefly read your short bio. So Suheri is a young scholar or researcher from the Center for Religious and Cross-Cultural Studies, Gadjah Mada University, Indonesia. And he is one of the authors on the module of the School of Indigenous Religion. So without further ado, please, I give you 15 minutes to present.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Khanif. Good morning, everyone. So I'm Harry. I'm from Center for Religious and Cross-Cultural Studies. First of all, I would say thank you for all community to organize this international conference. Without further ado, my paper entitled "The Dynamic Fragility of Human Rights Concept: A Study of Shia in Indonesia." Next slide, please. Okay, for the introduction, so Indonesia is a country that not officially affiliated with any particular religion. However, the legal system in the country reflects an environment in which Islam dominates all sectors. One of the effects is the categorization of non-Muslim as deviant groups, which raises issue of the majority-minority relation. The blasphemy law is a prime example that it has been used to safeguard the dominant religion. As a result, it has been instrumental in the marginalization of the minority group. As illustrated by the Shia group in Indonesia, they are subjected to the numerous negative impact, including violent attacks, burning homes and Islamic boarding school, stone throwing at the religious site, and even being banned from practicing their religious beliefs. Next slide, please. So this paper aims to enhance the field of the majority-minority issue by examining a complex predicament about the Shia case, resulting in a severe breach of the freedom of religion or belief, or alternatively building an action in interreligious relation. And this study argued that the marginalization is a social construct rooted in the interests of the dominant group, which seek to sustain control aimed at ever-changing condition. And this study used a library research and qualitative method with historical approach to analyze and synthesize finding. And the data for this article is primarily from literature, journal, books, annual report. On the other hand, the secondary data derived from other significant materials to support each chapter of this research. So next slide, please. Okay, let's jump to the result and discussion. So the first dynamic, it is emerging in the interweaven Shia issue at the national and international level. So the persecution of Shia group in Indonesia escalated during the Suharto era, which related to a global, national, and local politic dynamic. The sectarian conflict in Indonesia directly resulted from the influence of the Middle Eastern agenda. For instance, the Indonesian Islamic Propagation Council, WII, has been actively promoting the idea of Arabs. In the 1960 and 1970, this organization opposed the socialist idea of Gamal Abdel Nasser, which focused on eliminating communism in Indonesia. Furthermore, they faced new challenges during the Iranian Revolution, which threatened the stability of Saudi Arabia supremacy in Indonesia. This organization took strategic actions as partnering with various charity organizations to counter Iranian influence and promote anti-Shia discourse. And next slide, please. At the national level, the Suharto government was strengthened also by Ayatollah Khamenei revolution in 1970. It strengthened the stability of Suharto regime for a potential revolution among Indonesian Muslims, particularly for Indonesian students who hope for Islamic revival. And also to address this concern, this government implement two strategic agenda. The first one is supporting anti-Shia discourse propagated by several Saudi foundations, and the second one is attempting to control the Indonesian Ulama Council (MUI) by highlighting differences between Sunni and Shia and creating fatwa against Shia ideology. Next slide, please. Okay, let's jump to the second dynamic in the fragility of human rights in Indonesia. So it reflects in establishing power to MUI, Indonesian Ulama Council. So MUI is institution established by Suharto in 1970 to solve the issues associated with communism. So MUI is an example of how religious authority can be a tool to protect government power. And the fatwa issued by MUI hold a significant weight in shaping public morality and legislation. And there was a significant shift, the role of MUI. Previously, MUI focused on protecting Pancasila as ideology of Indonesia as the foundation of pluralism, but MUI priorities changed and started following the Islamic hegemony. This shift marked a turning point of MUI critique of pluralistic idea. So the rejection of pluralism has increased in blasphemy cases, in which MUI complement the concept of blasphemy and pluralism, often leading to accusation of defamation against those who differ from Sunni beliefs, such as the Ahmadiyya and Shia group. Relating in these cases, Foucault on discipline and fairness stated that the distinction to affirm its communal identity and differentiate itself from other social identities which remain the normalization pattern. So the categorization of individual as either inside or outside of Islam as defined by MUI has significant social implication. So the state also recognized the authority of MUI, and there is support for this organization from the government and Islamic group. This reveal their individual political, governmental, and religious affiliation may be unaware or even endorse the MUI position which harm pluralism in Indonesia. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, let's jump to the third dynamic. So it reflects in the debate within Islamic organization, pluralist versus conservative. So the existence of Shia has been negatively impacted by conservative Islamic organization, including Nahdlatul Ulama or NU. So despite being a prominent organization that promotes religious pluralism and tolerance, it was influenced by Abdul Rahman Wahid or Gus Dur. There has been a rise discriminatory practice against Shia group with individual associated with NU in West and East Java. So the pluralistic idea of Gus Dur created a lively debate within the body of NU. One of the Gus belief about Shia was that NU shared similarities. He pointed out that certain religious practices were similar with NU. And also such as pilgrimage to previous NU leader. So this is make a debate within the NU. Some religious leaders disagree with Gus Dur belief that Shia group was distinct from NU. Other within NU supporting Shia group advocate for tolerance and oppose labeling those with different akidah or belief as a non-believer or kafir. So anti-Shia discourse become crucial in maintaining social acceptance within the Sunni community. Anti-Shia discourse intensified in the 1990s by conservative Nahdlatul Ulama, Salafis, Reformists, Persi, Al-Irsad, and Muhammadiyah. Next slide, please. Okay, the fourth dynamic is the worldwide of majority power. So the limitation of freedom of religion or belief in Indonesia encounter claim to protect public order, in which government apparatus argue that this is strategy to avoid disorder or chaos. No real relationship emerge between limitation and general charge. So the chaos Sunni and Shia is an intelligible example of how majority group utilize power to create the momentum to differentiate from the minority as a machine to develop the humanizing action. So relate to the Bagir as one of the scholar of the human rights on the study of freedom of thought, conscience, and religion in ASEAN, argue that there is a challenge to the concept of human rights in Indonesia and how Indonesian government always prioritize the right of the majority group to maintain public order. So it contributes to the Sunni Shia cases become unfinished conflict. So there are also, you can see in the screen, three groups with anti-Shia view in Indonesia, and these three groups directly or indirectly support each other to influence government to Islamic orthodoxy. The first one is the supporter of the ISIS group, which accrue propaganda from Indonesian sympathizer from Syria and Iraq to conduct violence against Shia group. And the second one is Saudi-oriented Salafis categorize the Shia as a heretical sect. And the third one is some conservative Nahdlatul Ulama members. And there is some negative construction to the image of the Shia group, specifically to the domestic issue, such as the first one, the Shia group are framed to committing a criminal act that can be disrupt public order. The second one is some prominent religious figure perceive Shia sympathizer as weakening the value of Sunni group. And the third one is many scholars from various affiliation construct a conception that there are many differences between Sunni and Shia. So this limitation of freedom of religion or belief in Indonesia refer to the morality sourced from the specific religious value, which are not neutral and directly strengthen orthodoxy. Next slide, please. So let's jump to the local cases about the complexity of sectarian welfare, Tajul Muluk cases. So the Tajul Muluk cases is one of the cases in Indonesia, in Madura. It is not only related to religious issues, but also interfere with social, economic issues, family issues, local authority interests, and national political issues. And for instance, in social economic issues, after 2004, Tajul Muluk became a target of anti-Shia sentiment when he became a very influential preacher in Sampang, Madura. It became a boomerang because some local ulama lost their power. On the other hand, one of the economic issues appeared when Tajul Muluk disrupted the popularity and financial income of several kiai in Madura. The limitation of freedom of religion or belief in Indonesia is constructed through the hegemony of politics of religion and the dominance of religion in public life. Indonesian blasphemy law is one of the president's instruction in 1965, included in Article 156A under the National Criminal Code. It is a source of restriction and limitation for several religious minorities to manifest their beliefs, worship, spread the teaching, and disseminate religious materials. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, the last dynamic about the Shia case in Indonesia is alternative action or communal coexistence. On the other hand, there are different stories about inter-religious relation in Wonosobo, Central Java, in which Shia, Ahmadi, Islam, and some followers of Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, and indigenous religion engage peacefully with majority group of Muslim occur for quite a long time. It is a factual action by Khanif, a local leader of NU and Wonosobo region. He stated that religious minority are Indonesian citizens protected by the constitution, so every activity must be perceived. Arif also emphasized that no person, political party, or even a religious group in this country has privilege to eliminate fundamental right of citizenship. So it is directly supported by the Article 18 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, ICCPR, which states that religion is protected by international human rights. Referring to Brett Scrub, emphasized the acceptance on equality for everyone is an element for freedom, justice, and peace in the world. So this case reveals hope regarding welfare in Indonesia. Our perspective may be a new affirmative method to build plurality, whether doctrine, religion, ethnicity, or culture in Indonesia, which emphasizing human rights principle and awareness of the pluralistic reality. Human rights become relevant in resolving and encountering unfinished conflict. Next slide, please. So, conclusion. So this study found that the marginalization is a social construct that arises from the interests of the dominant group in society, seeking to maintain counter under dynamic condition. In some instances, violence toward a particular group can become a form of touched acceptance or even embrace. This phenomenon is evident that the long-standing of Sunni-Shia conflict, which has persisted for centuries and continue to be shaped by global, national, and local political dynamic. This ideology represents an ongoing and solved conflict that all actors continue to perpetuate, framing the issue within the politics of majority and minority. On the other hand, Khalif Ahmad, as the chair of NU in Wonosobo, demonstrate a belief that religious minority are indeed citizens of the Indonesian nation. This stand is significant in its potential to mitigate sectarian conflict, as it underscores the principle that no individual or group hold the authority to strip away the right that belong to all human beings. That's all for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mas Suheri. So the last presenter will be Joan Paula Deveraturda. So she is a PhD student at Waseda University, Japan. Prior to study PhD, she graduated from Master of Laws in International Security degree from the Australian National University and Master in Human Rights and Democratization from the University of Sydney. Now she was a court attorney at the Philippine Supreme Court. She also teaches public international law in the University of the Philippines and special issues in international law in Far Eastern University Institute of Law and International Human Rights Law in the De La Salle University College of Law. 15 minutes is yours.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. So by way of quick introduction, my background is really law, but I've been a lawyer for the last 10 years, but I've been working in the Philippine development sector for the last 6 years. Okay, so my research is actually on navigating the policy making towards protection against online sexual abuse and exploitation of children as a form of violence against children in the Philippines, particularly looking at the legal experience of the Philippines from 1990 to 2002. I'm currently in my literature review phase, and today I will be presenting to you so far what I've been doing in my research, focusing particularly on the Philippines as a legal case study. My research utilizes the explanatory qualitative case study approach, and as a lawyer, the right duty correlative through the rights-based approach and localization of international law. Next slide, please. So today, my focus will really be on two things. The first one is the development of laws that reflect and reinforce the Philippines' commitment to implement child protection as part of its human rights obligation. And the second one is the promotion pathways that are available for the implementation of child protection in the Philippines, particularly in OSAIC. Next slide, please. So just by way of background, the Philippines is an archipelago of 7,107 islands with 3 major islands. So Luzon, the one in orange, Visayas, the one in yellow, and Mindanao, which is in green. It's actually fairly close from here. Next slide, please. By way of law and governance, it's a democratic and republican state, and we do have a presidential form of government, so that's elected by direct popular vote. And we do have 3 separate but co-equal branches of government: the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary. Domestic law really plays a critical role in the implementation of Philippine human rights obligations under international law, which is why my interest is really on this. So we are a party to a lot of human rights conventions, including those that cover child protection and rights of the child, but we do have a lot of challenges in this front as well. Next slide, please. So due to its history, it is both a civil and common law tradition, which means that we follow both existing laws, so laws that are implemented or are enacted through the legislative, and case law. So we also follow doctrines that are proclaimed by the judiciary. So both of them have to actually work hand in hand for anything to be enforceable in the Philippines. By way of international law as well, we do tend to follow a dualist perspective, which is why even if customary international law is something that the Philippine government recognizes as a source of obligation, for the most part, it's just a lot easier to go to courts and enforce and implement laws if there are domestic laws for these international obligations. Next slide, please. So as I said, what this means is that for human rights protection and promotion, particularly for the rights of the child, both for treaty law and customary international law, we recognize that it's binding, but we don't really get ahead in terms of accountability and enforceability unless there is a domestic law that covers these obligations. Next slide, please. So why is this issue, sorry, I think you can just keep clicking because it does have that art thing. Why does addressing, I think please click on the, back one slide, please. Oh, it's not appearing. Okay. But anyway, why does addressing OSAIC matter in the Philippines? So next slide, please. The Philippines has been a party to the Convention on the Rights of the Child. I'm really sorry about this particular slide. Since 1990. So we were one of the early adapters. And then we acceded to the optional protocol to the CRC on the sale, child prostitution, and child pornography in 2002. Even if we are a party to these key conventions, the Philippines has consistently been a hotspot for OSAIC. In fact, as of September 2023, we were ranked 2nd worldwide for cases of OSAIC. The increase in OSAIC cases reported during the pandemic, particularly between 2020 and 2022, reached an alarming rate of 265% increase. Convictions, there have been convictions, but they have not really served as deterrent. And as of last year, 2022, we did finally have an anti-OSAIC law. Next slide, please. So just in terms of local implementation, so we are a party to international conventions. But it really took a while for the Philippines to get to a point where cases involving OSAIC would really be covered by a particular law. What we've had so far are first, the Special Protection of Children Against Abuse, Exploitation, and Discrimination Act, which was in direct response to the CRC. This was in 1992, and then it was amended in 2003. So it essentially covered special protection for children against all forms of abuse, neglect, cruelty, exploitation, and discrimination, as well as anything that is prejudicial to their development. It covered children who are below 18 years old, or those who are over but are unable to fully take care of themselves or protect themselves from abuse, cruelty, or exploitation. It is primarily a criminal law. So it comprehensively acts as a deterrent, supposedly, for abuse and exploitation. But because this law, even after its amendment, it was enacted before the widespread use of internet in the Philippines. So it did not explicitly cover OSAIC cases. And then in 2006, we had the Juvenile Justice and Welfare Act, which established a comprehensive juvenile justice and welfare system in the Philippines by protecting children who are at risk of or in conflict with the law, as well as to promote their rehabilitation and reintegration into society. For purposes of OSAIC, the Juvenile Justice and Welfare Act is important because it does identify and define child at risk as children vulnerable to or at a high risk of committing a crime due to personal, family, and social circumstances, including being abused and or exploited sexually by their parents or guardians. The Philippine government obviously has an interest in providing early interventions that seek to address the issues that create this risk. And then in 2009, we finally had an Anti-Child Pornography Act, which was in recognition of a growing digital distribution landscape in the Philippines. So the Anti-Child Pornography Act particularly identifies the internet as a space through which images or materials of sexual abuse and exploitation of children are circulated. What it did also was to create family courts. So cases involving children, including child pornography, would be covered by family courts where judges are particularly trained to handle cases involving children. And then the last one was before the anti-OSAIC law last year, was the Cybercrime Prevention Act, which insofar as OSAIC is concerned, it expanded the temporal aspect of criminal acts defined under the Anti-Child Pornography Act. So as long as the acts were committed through a computer system and not necessarily just through the internet, the Philippine government can prosecute perpetrators. Next slide, please. So just key development. In 2018, Peter Scully, an Australian national and also pedophile, was finally sentenced in the Philippines. This was a very big case for us because it involved a non-Filipino. So essentially, he was sentenced by a regional trial court in Cagayan de Oro, which is a city in Mindanao, to 129 years in prison for syndicated child pornography, human trafficking, and child abuse, rape and photo and video voyeurism, covering 60 separate criminal cases. He was convicted along with his Filipina girlfriend, Lovely Margalo, and an ex-girlfriend, Carme Ann Alvarez. What they did was essentially entice several children from impoverished families in Cagayan de Oro to go to their home and abuse them on separate occasions from 2011 to 2014. These abuses were uploaded online for commercial consumption. The horrifying details really brought forth the need for two things. The first one is a law that consolidated specifically cases involving OSAIC for easier prosecution. And second, the necessity of multi-stakeholder and multi-country coordination to address OSAIC, particularly in light of the limited awareness and resources in the Philippines involving combating this crime. So finally, we had the anti-online sexual abuse or exploitation of children and anti-child sexual abuse or exploitation. So this is a very long law, but what it essentially did was to create, was to redeclare as a state policy the protection of every child from all forms of neglect, cruelty, abuse, and exploitation, particularly in light of the use of digital technologies. The increase in the reporting between 2020 and 2022 was really brought on by the fact that work from home became the norm, and the internet accessibility just increased because of this arrangement. Next slide, please. Oh, the next slide as well. My apologies, they're not coming out. But, okay, so child abuse, sexual abuse refers to any form of communication through any platform or format, or any physical interaction between a child and any person when the child is being used for any act or activity inducing sexual stimulation or for the purpose of sexual gratification in pursuit or the desire to have carnal knowledge of the child regardless of the gender and the perpetrator or the victim or the consent of the victim. The reason why this is very extensive is that it was for in the government's interest to cover as much as it could for purposes of prosecution. Next slide, please. Hopefully that will appear. If not, if anyone's interested in my presentation, I can just share it with you via email afterwards. My sincerest apologies for that. But there are two things that are key in this law. The first one is the effect of consent of the victim. Because one of the things that came out during a baseline study that was conducted in 2016 by an independent research outfit in the Philippines is that often the ones who push these children to engage in these acts are family members or guardians. And one of the excuses is consent. So by the fact that they're members of the family, there is it's not children having agency, but it's actually the family serving as actors for this agency. But of course, we're also recognizing that children do have agency, and even if the age of consent in the Philippines is 16, even if they reach that point, they are still technically minors. And there have been an argument made that if they do consent to it, well then, is there really a crime? So what this law did was to specifically provide that the consent of the victim is immaterial and it's irrelevant and shall not be available as a defense in the prosecution of an OSAE case. Another thing is there's a protection. Next slide, please. Yep, I've given up on my presentation appearing. The Good Samaritan clause. So there's a protection of Good Samaritan. What this means essentially is that if someone has information that should be reported, often they would have the material themselves. And having the material themselves is in itself a punishable act. But if they are reporting to the authorities for purposes of actually taking down these videos, pictures, or messages, as well as to proceed to prosecuting the perpetrators, then they are protected for as long as they do it in good faith. What they have is necessary to prevent access or dissemination, and that they report it within 24 hours from receiving that information. Next slide, please. This also goes into the safe harbor exception, which goes hand in hand. Again, that material for the purposes of reporting it to the authorities would be okay. It's not in itself a prosecutable offense. Next slide, please. Confidentiality is also key here. One of the things that have been done by family courts is to have a telecast. My apologies. Okay. Okay, I will proceed with the last two slides. So next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay. Essentially, what is important so far, what we've gathered, what I've seen in my literature review is that these laws develop through a multi-sectoral cooperation. So while the Philippine government recognizes that it does have the authority to create and implement laws, without the participation of particular Philippine government agencies and NGOs such as Save the Children, UNICEF Child Rights Network, Child Protection Network, as well as internet and mobile service providers, these laws would not have come into effect. But for purposes of ways forward, there is still a need to create a multi-sectoral capacity building initiatives, which means that even if non-governmental agencies or non-governmental groups as well as government agencies are already working, there is a need to increase or strengthen that coordination between them and have initiatives that particularly provide for effective implementation of OSAIC law. It's a fairly new law, so we don't know yet if it's going to be effective. But if there's anything that is hopeful in the review, it's that even if it took 22 years, it finally got there, and hopefully it will serve as an actual deterrent in addressing the OSAIC problem in the Philippines. So with that, I thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'm really sorry because I have to use my authority to manage everything here. So the discussion span from, we still have 5 minutes left. So the 4 presenters presenting like very big spans, starting from the right to peace, the right to health, the right freedom of religion, and then children rights. So we still have 5 minutes, please, if you have questions. Yeah. Whoever you choose, please.
Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Chairperson, and thank you for the presenter for the presenting. I really appreciate it. I want to ask to Mbak Anggit, right? Mbak Angga, about right now about the issue. But first of all, my name is Aji. I am undergraduate program student in Department of Politics and Government, and recently days. We face about there is a lot of cases suicide student in Semarang. We found 2 cases in Jogja also. Like there is a lot of cases about suicidal things. And then when someone posted in the TikTok about the the story, and people youth commented like, I wanna follow you, but I wanna like the. It means that we face a mental issue crisis right now. Then also, for me, as a man, when I tell my problem with my friends, some of my friends say that, men must strong, men must have a good mental, don't be so weak lah. Just like that. It's really a stereotype that not good in our society right now. My question is, what do you think about these matters right now, and what should we do? Also, what the solution that you bring, and also I really like the what you present about the Yuma Rehabilitation Center, and do you have any plan to develop this rehabilitation also for the youth who face the mental issue right now? I thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I don't want to be strict, but please direct question because we have very limited time. Please, you can choose whoever you want.
Okay. Hello, my name is Afis. I'm from the Department of Politics and Government too. I want to ask for the last speaker. I'm very excited with your topics because it's very similar with my thesis. So. To the point, the question is, so how do they, the policymaker and the policy implementer, measure how effective the policy and the program they made for the people? Because while I think that the case of online sexual abuse probably a bit hard to be overcome because maybe the online perpetrators of sexual crime does not use their identity in the internet and they can be very, very manipulative. I think that's the question. Thank you.
Next question, please.
Thank you. I'm Renata from ISFORP. First question to the last speaker. This is very interesting, and I need to know so the family court, what are their role, and then why, and do they actually handle the cases of not only women, child, but also women probably. If you can just a brief explanation about that, and for the Angga, for Angga as well, I think, it's very interesting on the mental health, and then when you involve the community, how, mental health is very difficult to measure and then monitor, observe, just like Mas tadi, and how do you train the community, just lay people to understand and then to handle that kind of case, even in the initial stage? Thank you.
Last question. Ooh, we have more. I don't know. Please. Why we have more?
Good evening. almost lunch, is it? So actually, I have a question for Angga, Suheri, and Joan. Let's just wrap up. Okay, for Angga, it is interesting, and I just want to know and curious about how do you persuade family to be open about the condition of the psychosocial that they family member have, and they able to and want to involve in your program. And for Suheri, for the fragility of the human right in case of the freedom of religion, do you think it is because of the written law that make it more fragile, or because of the other thing that happen in society like fatwa and other non-legal thing that make it more worse? And for Joan, just curious also, but in the law in the Philippines, is there any rehabilitation that for the victim? Just that. Thank you.
Okay, we will accommodate all questions, please. Okay, yeah.
Okay, terima kasih. Thank you. My name is Yesaya from UKSW Salatiga. I have a quick question for Scott. Can you elaborate a little bit more regarding the roles of academics, since you mentioned that in your presentation? And based on your research, what can you share in what way academics can contribute? Thank you.
Last question. Okay.
My name is Bidya and I'm from Nepal. And my research is also, I'm doing my research in mental health as well, and I have a question for you and Scott as well. So my first question is a follow-up from hers as well for her. It's about, you talked about support for the family members as well. So what kind of participation program you have for family members, and are they open to coming to these support groups? And for Scott, I'm quite interested because I'm doing my research in kind of a dialogue, and I like the concept of you talking about power and dialogue in one of your diagram. So I was just wondering if during your interviews or thing, is there like a different perspective of human rights in this dialogue? Thank you.
I must directly give this to
Are you happy for me to do that? Okay, all right. Just very briefly, in terms of academic involvement in democracy, I think when you think about a democratic framework, in particular liberal democracy, you have various points of authority, all of which provide a check and balance on each other. So we have government and executive, civil society, which I put academia into because of the breadth of civil society, if you understand what it is. But academia, media, the judiciary, courts, now all these various points of authority in a democracy, at least in a liberal democracy, provide a check and balance on each other. Now, what I was interested in looking at in my thesis, though, based on the responses from the interviewees, was that they were interested in participating more concretely in their society through civil society. Some were academics, some were people who were working in NGOs. And so I looked at the theories around what's called strong democracy, which moves liberal democracy into a new progressive modern democracy. In particular, I looked at some of the theoretical work that Benjamin Barber, the late Benjamin Barber, did in the 20th century. And it's a particularly progressive sort of democracy which invokes much more participation at grassroots level and across the board. So I see academia as playing a very important role in not only researching, but translating that research into useful information for policy development and discussion, especially discussion amongst the population. And I think it's particularly important at the moment because of so much misinformation that we seem to be getting in social media. And we can see that democracy is becoming fragile in Western countries because of the misinformation that is being distributed through social media. So we have to find a way around that problem. And I think academics are one group of people who can participate at that level. Policy development, writing articles, and engaging with communities. I hope that answers your question. Yes. Well, why don't I give another speaker? Yes, and then
Okay, then actually I am very surprised because there is a lot of question for me, and I believe that you are very, very concerned about mental health issue. And for the first question is suicide. Yes, we've been monitored it, and since our project is based on the community and mental health rehabilitation, so it's for the people who has diagnosed for the mental health issue. And what we're doing right now for the prevention and also for the promotion is we're already doing the socialization and doing the youth engagement. I mean, our project is in 21 villages in Yogyakarta. So we're trying to put the socialization for raising awareness in what we call Karang Taruna. Yeah, which we were doing the youth group in the village. We're trying to make the mental health more aware for them, and also we're doing the socialization for the counseling teachers in Gunung Kidul, for all of the counseling teacher in Gunung Kidul, and we're doing the screening test for the mental health. And this screening, actually, we're really encourage them to take for all of the youth, starting from the junior high school and up to the students in the college also. It is important to do the screening for mental health. And also we're trying to make a peer groups also in among the youth, so they can be the counselor for their friends. And for the second question about how to handle the community, how they can accept our project, actually it's a lot of work. Yeah, and it is, but we always think that when we're doing it with the empathy, we're doing it with our open heart, they will try to understand that we're just gonna help them. And also for the family, 1, 2, 3 doors, it's always closed for us whenever we're trying to reach them. But the thing is, we're make them understand that, hey, you're not alone. I'm here, I just want to help you. And for the mental health, it's not taboo. It's not like aib for us. Actually, everyone who has brain, I think it will be risk for the mental health issue. Agree with me? Yeah, yeah. And this is, it's okay if they don't want to trust us. But during that time, we're trying to do the self-help group. We organize that, and they will see that all of person with psychosocial disability gather around, and they can share their feelings. Then the family see that oh yeah, this is important for my family. And also we're doing it, I think it will be answering the next question. And also the self-help group, it's we're doing the group, family group also. So there is the family, it can be like space sharing for them, like I mean with the person with psychosocial disability who has diagnosed with bipolar or schizophrenia. They will be, oh, what about your family? What about your son, for the example? Yeah, my son is blah, 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 blah. They will, the family will feel like, oh, I'm not alone. And this is a safe place for me. And I think when the self-help group was conducted or held in the village, like what, Balai Desa, it's kind of like village meetings there, then people will know that, oh, there is a person with psychosocial disability in my village. So it will make the raising the awareness within the community. And also for the last question, how do you know family and how they accept their family? Actually, they are quite surprised too when we're trying to reach out for them, because it is hard to find the data for the psychosocial disability, because it's usually mixed with the disability data for the intellectual. So mental retardation and psychosocial disability, it's very hard for the community to detect. So when we're trying to reach out them, and for the family, we make sure that it is no pressure, it's up to you. But if you would like where to assist you, our community organizer will always doing the home visit. And also we're trying, if they don't have like basic services, I mean like KTP or identity card, we're trying to provide for them. So I think it makes them more trust with what we're doing. I think that, I hope it's answering all those questions. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I will try to be shorter. So for you, thank you for the question and for the image of fragility of human rights in Indonesia. I think it is too complex to describe this issue. So this is sourced by the written law. We have blasphemy law, also fatwa created by MUI, and also religious group, including who claim as a moderate group, like Nahdlatul Ulama or Muhammadiyah. They contribute to these issues. And also, if we take cases about the Tajul Muluk, it's also related to the family issue. For instance, his brother want to marry, Tajul Muluk brother want to marry someone who he like, but the brother suggests another person, and his brother return to Sunni belief and contribute to counter the Shia community in Sampang. So it is complex, but we have hope to emphasize the human rights principle and also the reality that the reality is pluralistic. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, I'll be really quick. So on the question on rehabilitation of victims, yes. So actually the law covers everything from rescue all the way to reintegration. The second one is on family courts. So what exactly do? They handle all cases involving welfare of families, children, which also means it can cover women. So protection orders, abuse cases, neglect, but even children who are at risk of committing crimes are actually covered by family courts. And the last one is, I'll be more than happy to share with you my proper presentation, but essentially the most concrete way that they're able to follow or to measure whether the laws are effective is really through prosecution. However, in recent years, there's also been a monitoring of prevention. So if there are cases where there are markers of potential victims of OSAEC and these are reported, those are covered as well. But what I would say is that these cases would not prosper, or the OSAEC law would not be implemented properly without proper coordination, particularly through the international community utilizing technologies that are available to identify people who are not necessarily who they present to be online.
Very short, just to answer your question about the feedback loop that you asked. And people saw that as part of their democratic entitlement. But because the feedback loop doesn't really exist at the moment, in the first instance, they wanted one to exist. So the differences in what they told me was not very great. They weren't very different. But everybody was in agreement that they wanted to have that reciprocity with government so that that information could be circulated both between government and them and government. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much. So give a round of applause. This is the end of this panel. Thank you very much, presenter. So I would like to invite the next chair, Mbak Maisi. Please, time is yours. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Mas Hanil.
Thank you, Mas.
Presumably you'll bring the paper.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I'd love to read it.
It is my pleasure.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you ya Mas ya. Oke. Mau diangkat nggak? Cuma 3 orang pembicaranya. Oke. Oh dari situ aja, oke. Oke.